brief background of how we got here. So the Corps of Engineers has been working on an e-application system for over 20 years now. It's something that Congress has had in multiple appropriation bills and has been pushing heavily in the past few years. And so we finally got this across the line. Obviously, in Virginia, there is there is a very good system in place that we've had for many, many years, where VMRC is the central collection agency for the joint permit application, and then they forward that to all the other agencies that need it, DEQ, ourselves, local wetlands boards. So when we learned that this new system was coming online that we were expected to use nationally, we spent some time talking to DEQ and VMRC about the best way to kind of integrate into the new system. And so what we're doing now is, as of September 1st or 2nd, actually, given the holiday, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is the central repository, the central receiving portal for all applications in Virginia. RRS is the system that we highly recommend is used. It is going to be the quickest way to get your project entered into our database and assigned to a project manager, generally same day, since we don't have to do any data entry on that. So we really highly recommend it. I'm going to also show you that we have a dashboard in RRS, so you'll be able to see the status of your project, if it's in draft form, if it's been submitted, if it's been accepted. It will show you who your project manager is. And eventually, a future improvement that headquarters is working on is they're going to have milestone statuses in there as well. I'm not sure exactly when that's going to come on, but they're working on that. So RRS really is the most transparent way, the most efficient way to submit and monitor your permit applications. We are still receiving or accepting applications through the RegRod email. I put in the chat, and I'm not sure, external folks, if you can see it. Justin, can you see in the chat the 3 links that I added?
No, I can't see those.
Yeah, sometimes the chat doesn't work externally. So I don't know what the best way to do that is. I can do it this way. Here we go. I will share the chat. So the 3 things that I put in the chat here are, first of all, our regulatory contacts page. This is something that's changed recently as well, not related to RRS. The timing was just happenstance. We had some technical difficulties with our old ROD phone number, and we are not able to use that anymore. So we have updated our contacts page here. And you'll see that we're still in the same sections, but there is a regulator of the day for each section. And so you can access that either through an email or through a phone number. And there's one for each of the sections, as well as information for the chief of each section. And so that's how we're replacing that general regulator of the day phone number that we used to have. This will get you a person answering the phone again, which is one of the things that we really wanted to do during COVID. Obviously, we weren't staffed that way. Since then, we have not been able to resume having folks answering that phone because of the technical difficulties we're having. So with these section phone numbers now, you will be able to call and talk to a person. They're going to be familiar with your region and the processes in that section. So hopefully it'll be better customer service that way. The other thing I've got in here is the link to RRS, which hopefully everybody has, but if not, and then as well, the link to our RegRod email. So if you don't use RRS, you can submit a PCN application. You can submit still the old JPA PDF. You can submit your application, whatever format you'd like, through that RegRod email. Common question we get is there are 2 versions of this email floating around. Both versions do work. So if you run into that, no worries, they will both get to the right place. Again, if you do submit through that RegRod email address, it is going to be slower to get to a project manager because our data entry team is going to have to put hands on it. It's going to have to enter all that information to our database. It's a more complicated, longer procedure. And so it's going to be slower to be assigned to a project manager. And you don't have that oversight like you do in RRS with the dashboard. So we highly, highly recommend using RRS, but we can accept through the email as well. Okay, so the next thing I'll talk about is I'm going to actually walk through. So this is what RRS looks like when you first log in. This is the same email address. I just share it with you. I'm going to actually do this demo in our beta test site so that I can put in information that won't go into our database. So you're going to get that standard language to accept. Very first thing, and this is one thing that I have answered a lot of questions on, there are a lot of things in this application that you cannot do without signing in. There are some things you can. So you can access our public notices, you can report violations, you can get RRS support, and then we've got a lot of information about the program here. Those you can all access without logging in. However, if you want to submit a request, you have to log in to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this top right button, big blue button that says sign in. You do need a login.gov account. If you have an account for another agency's use, that's fine. You can use the same account. In fact, it won't let you create more than one login.gov account with a certain email address. So if you have one already, you're in this sign in tab here. You're just going to enter your email and password and submit. If you do not have a login.gov account, you're going to go to this create an account tab, put in an email address. For those of you that are in regulatory, you cannot use your work address. It's got to be a civilian address. And then submit. So it's a pretty simple process. I think it's going to send you a code that you have to enter to access, but creating accounts very, very simple. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in with my information. Okay, so once you sign in, these are the options that you're presented with. You can start a request. There is a tab that will help you determine what pathway you need to go down if you're not sure where to start. And then also a link to your dashboard to see your applications that you have started drafting or submitted. So we're just going to jump right in to start a request. Actually, before I do that, let me run through some of the things at the top of the page here too. Support is something you might find useful. So there is a way in here to submit a ticket. This will go to the National Development Team. I would recommend using this if you're running into technical issues with the site. If you have questions about the type of information you should be entering, that's something that you can contact our Norfolk District office about. But if there's technical things like pages aren't loading, that type of thing, then I would recommend submitting a ticket directly to the development team. This button here will lead you back to the regulatory contacts page that I showed you earlier. There is a way to submit feedback. I will say that the national team is working on several major improvements to the system, but we're always looking for feedback on how to make this easier, more accessible, more understandable, anything. We're looking for that feedback. And I do know that the development team has already incorporated some items that we received through feedback. So they are actively monitoring that and implementing things. It's not just going to a black hole somewhere. There are some basic videos in here, very short videos to kind of get you acquainted with the site and our program. And then at the bottom, if you're having problems with login.gov, there is a help guide in here that you might find useful. The dashboard will always be up here. You can see I've got a lot of test projects in here, but for each of your projects that's in here, it will have this status. Draft means that you've started it and saved it, and it's still just sitting in your queue and hasn't gone anywhere. Once you click at the end of that process, the submit button, it will change to submitted. Then at that point, our data entry team on our side will see it in our database. They will accept the project and they will assign it to a project manager. At that point, your status is going to change to this darker green completed. And you'll see here on this one, at that point, you get a DA number, the project manager name, and the project manager phone number, trying to get them to add the email as well. And so, you know, this is a good way to track the overarching progress of getting it to the project manager and knowing who to contact if you're not hearing anything. In addition, there are some buttons over here that while you're working on a draft, you can go back in and most of these things you can hover over and get those little screen tips. You can edit the request. You can download the documents as PDFs. So everything that you've entered in populates into PDF documents. This is very handy if, for example, you need somebody to review the application before you submit. You can download the draft as PDFs, share it with them, allow them to do any review. Then you can go back in here to the edit button, make any changes you need to, and submit. There's also an option in here where you can add a request to this project. So if you were to submit a JD request for a project in RRS and then later on want to submit an application, then you can go to the JD request, click on this button, and you do not need to log in the project location information. It will just take that information from the previous request and then allow you to move forward with the new request. So it's a little bit of a time saver. And then this last button will either be to cancel the draft request, or if you've already submitted it, you can withdraw the request. So this dashboard will allow you to manage your projects that way. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have a way to do revisions to these projects. That is an improvement that they're actively working on, and hopefully will come in into production here soon. Okay. So now, are there any questions? I guess I'll stop there. Are there any questions on the overall, you know, intent of the process, background information before we jump into an example project? Multiple people at the same project. Yeah, they're working on that one. Completed versus assigned. They've got a lot of statuses in here that I'm not sure they need, and I think they may be working to minimize some of those. That's a good question. I will take that one back and get clarification on that. I'm also going to be posting a video similar to this on our website, a quick guide to submitting general permit application and some frequently asked questions. So some of these questions we get today, I will add to that when we post and also include some answers that I can't provide today. By revisions, yes, once the application is submitted. So if you have a draft project, as you can see here, you can go in and edit the request. Once you click that submit button, you can no longer edit in RRS. Thank you, Rowan. Okay. Okay, so let's jump into an example project and we'll go from there. Okay, so the first question you're going to get here is, and to me, the wording of this is a little confusing, but would you like to start a new request based on an existing RS project? So if you're starting a brand new request not tied to a previous project that we've received, then you are going to hear say no. So it's not based on an existing RS project. You're going to start a brand new request. Throughout the system, you're going to see this red asterisk. These are required fields. It's pretty standard for most of these applications. It will not let you submit your application until there's something in all of the required fields. If you are running into a problem where you're not entirely sure how much or how little to put into a field, my recommendation would be do your best, put what you can in there, submit it, and then you can work with your project manager to add additional information to the record if you need to. Okay, so this first one is a project name. I'm just going to put test in for most of these fields, but just recommend you make it as descriptive as possible. And then that will give us a name to look up in the future, as well as the NAO number once it's assigned. The next question, have we previously issued a file number for any part of the project area? So the way our database works is we try to retain one number, one NAO number for a particular geographic area. So that parcel, you can go to that NAO number and see all activities that have happened on it. So if you have previously submitted anything to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for that property, you would select yes, and it will allow you to enter that NAO number. And then that way we won't create a new number, we'll reuse that number at a new action. I'm going to go ahead and select no just for ease. Next piece here is providing the project location. You can do that either this first box will allow you to type in an address or the latitude, longitude. You can do it on a map. So if you're familiar with most of these WebViewer mapping applications, ArcGIS style, that will be pretty familiar to you, and you can enter your project by a point, a line, or a polygon. And then for very large projects, you can upload a geodatabase file. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a physical address for this. Maybe. There we go. And you can see as you're typing, it will start pulling up options. Okay. Project area is a required field, and make sure you select the acre or square foot unit of measurement. And then there's a few other fields with some optional information. So as you go through the page, you're going to have buttons at the bottom that allow you to either go next or go to the next section. This screen is going to ask what type of request you want to enter. So the no permit required is new this week, actually. You'll see these blue question mark here buttons that will allow you to view more information throughout the system. So that's always a good option if you're not sure what to select. The no permit required is only if the activity does not require a permit. So this would be for activities that we don't regulate, or it would be for activities that are exempt from regulation. If you select that, it will lead you through a bunch of questions to verify that you meet that criteria. At the end of it, it will give you a letter that either says you do meet the no permit required and give you a letter to that effect. It will assign a number in our database. So if there's ever a compliance question, we'll have a record of that. If you don't meet the criteria for that no permit required letter, it will ask you if you'd like to submit an application. But so that module, if you're looking to get a no permit required letter because of geographic jurisdiction, then that's not going to get you there. It's going to ask you to submit an application to do so. The next section is delineations or jurisdictional determinations. So, you know, if you have a delineation report, you want us to confirm the delineation, or if you'd like us to do a preliminary or approved jurisdictional determination, you can check those. Pre-construction notification would be for our general permits. If the work you think is going to qualify for a general permit, you would select that. And then if it doesn't qualify for a general permit, it would be an individual standard permit, and that's that DA permit. And then the final option is just kind of general pre-application requests, NEPA project scoping requests. So since the vast majority of our applications are general permits, I'm going to go ahead and check this one. At the bottom, click next. So you're going to see the location that you entered previously pop up. at this point, you're going to pop to a new, basically a new module. After the screen, you cannot change your project location. So they're asking you to verify it's correct on this screen. And then there's a statement in here explaining that this permit process is a joint permit application process and will be shared with the DEQ, the VMRC, and the local wetlands boards. So if you're good with location, you're going to click continue. Okay, so this is the actual application itself. You're going to see that there's the option to exit. There's the option to save progress. It should do this automatically as you walk through. But if you do decide to exit the form, I recommend you click the Save Progress button before doing so. You'll see it gives you a status of your application, which is just draft at this point. And then it's got this table of contents on the left that's going to lead you through all the parts of the application. So the first tab is instructions. If you're not familiar with our nationwide permits, that's all laid out here with links so that you can look at those and see what your project qualifies for. And then it's going to go on to give a little background information on what a complete application is and the things that you should submit to ensure your application is complete. So if you click these plus signs, it will give you more information. And then there's a few additional information boxes even within there. So we need a good description, we need good project plans, we need to know where the waters of the United States are. There has to be a mitigation statement of some sort, even if we don't propose mitigation. We need to understand your knowledge of any threatened and endangered species or historic resources on the site. Wild and scenic rivers is not an issue in Virginia, we don't have any. And then there's going to be some questions about whether your project will have an effect on any of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers civil works projects. If so, that would require a 408 authorization. So we ask questions about that to determine if they need to look at that. And then there's a few frequently asked questions down at the bottom that I assume will be growing as we get more and more of those. So again, you can use this plus sign to open those and see more information. Okay. So at this point, you're going to get these blue banners at the bottom for moving on to the next section. When you click that, you're going to see this location-specific information. Again, this just explains how we have one central location for submitting joint permit applications in Virginia, and those will be shared with the other agencies. Moving on to the next section. Okay. So when you are logged into the system up in this top right corner, you're going to see here, I'm logged in as myself, and then your role is going to be listed as well. The two available roles are applicant or agent. It's important that this profile be set up correctly because there's an option to auto-populate fields from it. So if you click on that, go to your profile, you can see you can change your role in here. Role is important because the system is set up that if you're the applicant, it will give you the forms that your agent needs to fill. If you are the agent, it's going to give you forms that the applicant needs to fill. So it's very important that you select the appropriate role. You also want to check your information in here, make sure that that's all correct and filled in because, like I said, that's all going to auto-populate if it's in here. So address, phone number, email, all that information. So when we go to contact information back in the application, you're going to see this button that says use profile data. So you're going to go ahead and click that and you can see it auto-populates name, address, phone number, email, all those required fields. At the bottom, if you're in the applicant role, it's going to ask, do you have an agent? If you select yes, it's going to bring up some additional fields. It's going to ask you to add a row for that agent and their contact information. And then it's going to provide a blank agent authorization form that you can download, fill out, and then you're going to upload it into this box below. It will allow you to move beyond the screen without doing that. I'll show you. See, if you click next, it will allow you to move on. So if you do need to send that to somebody to fill out, then you can move on through the process. One of the things that's very helpful is these green and red circles will tell you if you completed all required fields or not. So that will be, if you move on without uploading that agent authorization form, then, or the applicant's form, then that will show up as red, and it won't let you submit at the end, but it will let you move through the process. There's an additional comment field. There's a right of entry form. Same thing. You can download the right of entry form, complete it, and then upload it in the box below. I'm just going to go ahead and change this to no. And then I will actually very quickly switch my role over so I can show you what it looks like for agents. So if your role is agent, you're going to see, have you been hired to complete the application process? The assumption is yes. You're going to put your information here, and there's still that same use profile data, so it'll auto-populate. Agent authorization form, same as previously, download, complete, and then upload in the box below. And then the right of entry form. And then it's going to ask for the applicant information. And then you can see agent, I don't know why that is pre-filled that way, applicant contact information. So like I said, it's very important your role be correct in here for what you're trying to do. Okay. So I'm just going to say no, so we can move on to the next section. I'll stop very briefly to see if there's any questions. Rowan's doing a great job. Thank you, Rowan, for answering a lot of those. Is there anything else in there that we need to address?
There is this question about how you would find an NAO number if you don't necessarily know, but you know you had a previous one, but you don't know what it was. I don't know what you would recommend how people would find that number out.
Good question. I would say probably go ahead and call the ROD phone for the section that project is in, and they can look it up in our database and give you that number. Okay. So the next screen is going to be general project information. You can see if there are fields that are mandatory but not completed, you'll get these red bars and you'll get the red exclamation points. So they try to make it very obvious when you're missing information. As you go through here, it's going to pull forward the project name you previously entered, as well as if there was a previous project number. And then there are 3 required fields: project description, project purpose, and nature of activity. I recommend you use these circles with the additional information so that you enter everything that you need to. One of the potential challenges that we've had with implementing the system in Virginia is trying to figure out which agencies have an action that needs to be taken. So what I recommend, we're trying to work on some revisions to make that a little bit more obvious, maybe some check boxes saying, are you applying for a core permit? Do you need a DEQ permit? Do you need a BMRC permit? Until we get that improvement in place, I would recommend as part of the project description, you also put in who you need to take action on this. So, requesting core permit, requesting BMRC or DEQ permit, that kind of thing. That'll just help us very quickly be able to screen these projects. And if an agency doesn't have an action, then they don't have to spend a lot of time reviewing it. So I'm just going to enter tests in these fields to move on. Okay. The next screen, and you can see that circle turned green, so we're good. The next screen is permit information. So if you pull down this menu here, there is an I'm not sure button, but we recommend you take your best guess. So we've got all of the nationwide permits listed out here. And then at the bottom of the list, hopefully I'm not making you too seasick, are other general permits that are specific to Norfolk District. So there's the SPGP, the State Programmatic General Permit for Linear Transportation Projects, SPGP for residential, commercial, industrial, and recreational projects. Then we've got our PASDO permits for shoreline projects, either category A, B, or C, VMRC reef permits, and then we've got RP1 and RP11, which are for VDOT projects, as well as RP15 for ditch maintenance projects. So select the permit that you think applies. It could be multiple permits. It will let you select multiple options here. If you select something by mistake, each one has this little red, well, it's red when you hover, otherwise black, X next to each of those ones you selected. And so you can just click that and it'll go away. So once you've got the permits that you think are appropriate, scroll down. This section here is if there were previous permits issued for your project area. That's helpful for us to know. You just select add a new row. It will, again, be very obvious which fields are required. So if it was an individual permit, a nationwide, regional, or programmatic general permit, select the type of permit, the file number, the date applied, approved, denied. Date applied is the only one that's required. If you select in any of these tables, if you add a row that you find you need to delete, just select the box to the left, and then you can remove selected rows. And then it's going to double check that you really want to do that. And then it's gone. The next section is statutory authority. So Section 404 of the Clean Water Act or Section 10 of the Rivers Harbors Act. If there are folks on here that aren't familiar with their program, the most basic explanation is generally if it's tidal, so if it's a tidal water or a tidal marsh, that's going to be Section 10. Generally, if it's non-tidal, it's going to be Section 404. And that's overly simplistic, but at least it will give you some information to check one or the other or both. There are times when it would be both too, and it allows you to do that. Unfortunately, there's no I don't know here, so you have to select something. Scrolling down, if you choose up above a nationwide permit, there are a few nationwide permits that require some additional information as part of the pre-construction notification. So if you click on this plus sign, it opens that up and it shows you what permit and then what additional information, along with a text box below that you can enter that information in. Then there's always is any portion of the work complete? So if you select yes, we know that there's some after the fact permitting going on. If you select no, then we're in a much better place, but important to know. Okay, so if you select Section 10 up here, it's going to also populate a dredging section down below. It's going to ask, is your proposal involving any dredging? If you select yes, it's going to bring up some additional required fields asking for further information on the dredging activities. If up above you only select Section 404, you will not get this dredging section. I'm going to go ahead and change this to no, just so I don't have to fill in those fields. Rowan, how are we doing on questions? Anything we need to answer right now?
I think we're doing pretty good right now.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on to the next section. So one of the really cool things about this system is it does reach out to the Fish and Wildlife Service's IPAC database and pulls in a list of species that may be found within the project location you entered. So you can see here in this case, monarch butterfly is proposed and tricolored bats proposed. You can select if you feel that either of those will be affected or if you would like to conference on them. Then as part of our complete application requirements, we do have to have some sort of statement on endangered species. So if checking those boxes is pretty much everything you know, you can simply just write none in here. If you do have additional information, such as surveys, any type of narrative information like that, you can enter that in that box as well. Same thing with historic properties, Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. This is just a tell us what you know type of informational box. If you have nothing to add, you can just type none. Whatever you can tell us will be helpful. National Wild and Scenic Rivers will always be no in Virginia since we don't have any. Okay, and then this last box is what I mentioned earlier about USACE civil works projects and 408 permission. So if your project has potential to affect a civil works project, you would select yes down here. And then it's going to ask you if you have already worked with our Section 408 person, who is Katie D'Amico, to get that permission ahead of time. So if you already have it, you can say yes, and the submission date, we would recommend you upload it, which is a further screen. But if you don't have that ahead of time, that's fine too. Just select no, and we will work that process concurrently with the application process. If you are not sure, I would recommend just checking. I'm not sure at this point. We do have a link to a mapper later on that will show you exactly where those projects are and help you answer that question. So this system was set up to work as a national system. And then for each individual district, we get one page that's specific to us. And so those specific data sets have to be associated with those pages. So we couldn't put it right here, but it will come up. Okay, so moving on to the next section. This is going to be the aquatic resources that are jurisdictional under the CORS program. So there's going to be, and I think there was a chat comment about this, a separate document for DEQ where you'll have to identify what's jurisdictional under their program. This mapper here is strictly what's jurisdictional under the CORS program. If you're familiar with our bulk upload process, we can do it that way. And there are links here for the required documents and process. If you are not doing that bulk upload, you can enter it in the map. There are some map use tips. You can click the plus sign to see those. But this is really very similar to most of your web-based mappers. You just want to click in the map, zoom into your site. We'll zoom into Craney Island here. And then over to the left, you can create a line feature, a polygon feature, or a point feature. So you just click on your map for each of the corners. And then when you're all done, double click. Very simple. If you want to add a line feature, same thing. Click for each of the vertices of your line. When you're done, double click. And then if you want to do a point, just one click. So you can add all of your aquatic resource features in here. And then as you scroll down, you can provide HGM information, but it's not required. And then you'll see that what you created in the map also populates into a table here below. So polygons, lines, and points. You can change these labels to make them more descriptive if you'd like. It's going to automatically populate the state, the latitude, the longitude. If you entered a polygon or a line, it will fill in the measurements for you. With a point, obviously, there are no measurements for it to calculate, so you're going to be required to enter those here. And then there's some additional optional fields. These are not required, but if you do know them, you can provide them. Okay. Moving on to the next section. This is impacts and mitigation. And you can see here too, as you go, it's going to give you that little green check that it's auto-saving. For impacts, same thing, you can do a bulk upload if you've got a lot of them. Or you can enter them in this table below. You're going to add a new row. The water name or label is a pick list based on the aquatic resources you entered in the previous screen. So you can select the aquatic resource that's to be impacted. Since that's the aquatic resource name, you're also going to give it an impact name. Then it's going to give you a pick list of activities. So it can be that you're converting from one type of aquatic resource to another, a discharge of dredge material, a discharge of fill material, dredging in section 10, ecological restoration. Then there's this other category. So for example, aquaculture, if you're doing some sort of crossing that is either over or under a section 10 water potentially. There is an option for removal of section 10 structures, for construction of section 10 structures, or transport of dredge material. So select the type of activity. It's going to ask you what type of materials, resource type, whether it's a permanent loss. When you select yes, it's going to change that impact duration automatically. The amount type, your fill area, it's going to ask you for your length width to calculate the proposed area amount. Oops. There you go. So it's going to auto-calculate that for you. Just check and make sure that the unit areas are correct. Okay. This is a required field here that basically asks for any additional information you have about those impacts. Every application has to have a mitigation statement. So you want to talk about how you've avoided impacts to aquatic resources, how you've minimized them, and if you have not been able to avoid all impacts, then potentially if you propose to do some sort of compensatory mitigation. So along those lines, this question right below asks if your impacts exceed the national or district thresholds. This is specific to compensatory mitigation. So if you click on this box here, it's going to explain to you that generally impacts losses greater than 1/10 of an acre of wetlands or 3/100th acre of stream. Generally above those levels, compensatory mitigation will be required. So if your impacts were above that, you would select yes, which is going to bring up a new box. That's going to ask you to explain basically how you're going to do that compensatory mitigation. So are you going to do mitigation bank credits, in lieu fee credits, permittee responsible mitigation? And select no. This question is, do you propose compensatory mitigation above and beyond what's required? So if you are going to, you can select yes, and it's going to ask you for that information, or no. Okay, any questions?
Could you scroll up to the top of that impacts page again? There's some questions about uploading the as a bulk upload. So up there are those template files where you would do the bulk uploads for impacts.
Yeah, so I think, Rowan, my question, when you do the aquatic resource, you guys actually have a geodatabase that we can download in the templates, and that has a bunch of your fields and your validations already in it, whereas there is not one for impacts.
Okay. I'm
These are all
not sure. I thought we had a geodatabase for impacts, but we might not. I might be wrong on that one.
Because that would definitely be easier for us to upload. You know, if we can do the one with the wetlands in it, then we can just cut that down for just our impacts and upload that as well, versus typing everything in Excel or exporting to a CSV.
Okay, that's something, Rowan, if you could take note of that, and we can go back to the national team and ask about that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the next page, this is the location-specific questions down here. You can see the page we were just on, there is a red exclamation point, which means we missed something on that page. So if we go back, it will tell you at the top what fields. And then it also highlights the fields in red. So it makes it very easy to figure out what you might have missed. You can see it's now green. So moving on to the Commonwealth of Virginia Joint Permit Application. So this page is basically asking for questions that will verify whether you meet our regional conditions. So as you go through them, sometimes if you select yes, additional fields will pop up. We tried to provide links so that you can, figure out how to answer the question by going to these links. So do you have any SAV within your project area? Is there anadromous fish in your project area? Do you have wild trout waters? I will give you a little preview. It's looking like for our next round of nationwide permits, we will be dropping this trout waters regional condition, as well as this next one. Do you have a state listed species within 2 miles of the proposed activity? It looks like that's not going to be required under CZMA for this next round of nationwides. But for now, under this round, this is one where if you answer yes, it's going to ask, did you submit your project to DWR for coordination? And you can select yes or no. And that'll help us determine if you meet the regional condition. It asks about Chesapeake Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve in Virginia, along with that information. It's going to ask if you generated through IPAC an official species list. If you select yes here, it's going to ask you to upload a copy of that. That's very helpful to us because we can use that project number, go back into IPAC and just check off that there is a federal nexus, and that allows us to use that for our review. Is there potential to affect a federally listed threatened or endangered species or designated critical habitat? So this is specific to NIMS, and we do provide a link to the NIMS mapper. Are you proposing to plant any invasive species? If you're going to do culverts and pipes, are those going to be countersunk per our regional conditions? Are you proposing temporary fill or impacts? If you select yes here, it's going to ask you to upload a copy of your restoration plan. So this question here is back to that 408 Civil Works question again. Will your project affect any structures or works built by USACE? This is the link I mentioned, and it will show you where those projects are in Virginia and in Maryland. Unfortunately, the other adjacent states that have civil works projects in our area do not have those mapped yet. We're still working on that. But you can look for the ones that fall under Norfolk District and Baltimore District. So are you proposing stream restoration under Nationwide 27? There is those additional data needs forms that the natural channel design review checklist and selected morphological characteristics form, which you can upload here. This question asks if you are also requesting a permit from the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, and I think this was a question earlier in the chat. If you are, there is additional data that the DEQ needs. We are actively working on trying to incorporate those fields into RRS so that they will come up as fields similar to what you've seen previously in RRS. In the meantime, though, this is just a fillable PDF form. So if you are requesting a VWP or water quality certification from the DEQ, click on this link. It will download the form. You can fill out the form and then upload it in this box right here. And then if you select no, that box won't come up. So very, very critical that if you are requesting a DEQ permit that you complete and upload that form. And then the last question is, are you applying for a PASDO Category A? So again, PASDO is for some of our more simple shoreline projects. Category A is reporting only. So if you select yes, You can download the checklist, fill it out, upload it in this box. And then unless there's an issue, you won't hear anything further from us. You can go ahead and move forward with the work. Okay. So any questions on the district specific page? And this page probably will be growing. We talked to VMRC. They said that they may need some additional information that's duplicative of what we need for our review. So we'll probably be adding some additional questions to this page.
There's nothing specific to this page in the chat yet.
Okay, thanks, Ren. Okay, we'll move on. Getting near the end. So supporting information is the second to last. This is where you can upload any other documents that you feel would be helpful to our review. There is a limit on the files. Each file cannot exceed 100 megabytes, and in total cannot exceed 500 megabytes per save. There is a pick list here. You can say, yes, I do want to upload a document. You get this same table where you add a new row for each of your documents you're uploading. The document type, there is a list of, the general types of documents that we tend to get: project plans, photographs, wetland data sheets, delineation reports, mitigation plan. There's also at the very bottom, though, other, if your particular document doesn't fit one of those fields. We do need to have some metadata on that document. So it's going to ask you for the date it was created, a document label, and then information source or citation. And then it will give you a spot here where you can upload your file and then click add. And so each file will come up as a line on this table here. Can all documents be uploaded as one PDF? So you can. I think it would be helpful for our administrative records if each document type was uploaded separately, only because that way they'll be in our documents. It's clear what they are, and the project manager won't have to do as much file maintenance. If you upload all of your documents as one PDF, the project manager may have to spend some valuable time working to separate that out for the administrative record. So the intent here is really to upload it based on the type of document. Will the file size be increased in future updates? I'm not sure. I will say that part of the reason why we did limit the file size is because we've gotten lots of project plans that were done on CAD, and so it had that underlying structure to it. And we used to get science and engineering computers. We're now getting business computers, which don't have quite the same processor in them. And some of those plans take a long time to open and take a long time to redraw every time we're moving through them. So where you can make file sizes smaller and flatten documents as much as possible, it's helpful on our side as well. Are you able to submit an RS application for review if sorry, I don't know what LOCA is. Jared, if you want, I don't know if you can unmute.
Hey, yeah, now I'm unmuted.
Oh, letter of credit available.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, actually, we have recently clarified that with staff. So hopefully that will be less of an issue. You can submit an application with a mitigation proposal. We can issue that permit with that mitigation proposal. We do not have to have purchase, like a letter of purchase or a letter of credit availability to issue the permit. Those permits will be special condition to say you do have to provide proof of purchase prior to taking the impacts, but you don't need that to have the permit issued.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good question because we do know there's a lot of volatility and unavailability in the mitigation market right now, and that makes that very difficult, especially for projects where you're not immediately going to work. Understood. Cultural resources. Yeah. So if it's over 100 megabytes, yeah, okay, Rowan got it. Yep, we can get you a DoD safe link. Our email accounts now accept bigger file sizes. So that's something that maybe you could just put a note in that historic resource section that you'll send that report separately. And then either through email or through DoD Safe, which is an FTP site, we can get that. Okay, so once you have all the documents that you want to upload into there, next section, and you can see it's giving you this red bar saying, hey, there's some missing information still. You can click on the link to go directly to that area. Maybe. Or you can use the table of contents if that's not working. Take that. Okay. So now you can see that's all green up to there. We'll move on to the last page. So this is sign, certify, sign, and submit. Do read the statements to make sure you're complying with them. The signature box down here at the bottom is going to have your name written the way that you entered it under your profile. You have to type it exactly like that. So you can see if I start typing it differently, it's not going to let me click the submit request button. Has to be exactly as shown. And once I do that, then that submit request button is available. So at this point, you can either click that submit button. Once you do that, though, you cannot edit your application in RRS. Now, that's not saying that you can't submit additional information to your project manager later, revisions, that kind of thing. You just won't be able to get back into this application. So if you do submit there, you can. If you're quite ready to, you can save progress. And it shows here that it has. You can go here to download a draft PDF. So for example, if you need to share it with your applicant to have them look it over, share it among your coworkers, whatever, you can do that here. You can also, if you're done with this for the moment, exit the form. It's going to ask if you've saved, which you have, so okay. And then if you go to my dashboard, you're going to see here 9/26 is today. So this is the one I was just working on. And it is showing as a draft. At any point when you're ready to go back in, you can go to this edit request button. You can download the PDF, which is the entire application that you entered in here. If you go back to edit, it's just going to pop you right back into that draft application. If you need to change anything, you can go to those sections, make any adjustments, and then go to the certify and sign and submit page at the end. And when you're ready, you can submit the request. And there we go. So it says your request has been submitted to Norfolk District. You click OK, it automatically takes you to your dashboard, and you'll see that instead of draft, it now says submitted. As I said, you won't get this DA number or the project manager information until the data entry team accepts the project on our side and assigns it to a project manager. I usually tell people 24 to 48 hours, but honestly, RRS, the volume is still pretty limited. And so generally we're getting a very quick response on that same day. You'll get that acceptance and project manager assignment. You'll also receive an email that's auto-generated by RRS, letting you know that we've accepted it and it's assigned. And so at this point, you can see that edit button now becomes just view request. So we're working on revisions, but right now you can't do that. You can still view your documents, and you can withdraw the request. At this point, once the data entry team accepts it and assigns it, they're also going to send a FTP packet to the VMRC, to the DEQ, and to all of the wetlands boards, unfortunately, at this point. If you're a local wetlands board on this call, I apologize. I wish there was a way that we could, get that a little bit more dialed in. We're working on that. We're actually working on incorporating that data sharing functionality directly within RS, and that will be better for everybody, but it's going to take a little time. So at this point, that's how we're doing it, is sharing that through FTP. So again, unless there is some issue, those projects should be to those agencies same or next day. Okay. So that's really all I have. What questions do you all have for me?
There is a question, the most recent one. If we are applying for a VWP permit, is the DEQ certification statement included on the DEQ form? I'm just not super versed in the DEQ form. So if you know that off the top of your head.
My guess is yes. I believe this has everything on it that you need to apply for the DEQ permit. Sorry if I'm going too quickly and making you seasick, but. So it's got the signature blocks and certification. Yeah. Yeah. So it looks like everything you need is on this form. Is there a way to assign an impact to multiple aquatic resources? So, and this, and I will tell you, this has been kind of one of those interesting conversations internally at the Corps and how we've entered things in the past. Keep things as simple as possible. So if you have PFO wetlands, you can enter those as one aquatic resource. And then that way you can do one impact for those PFO wetlands. What I would not recommend is combining aquatic resources that are different, because that makes it much harder for us to break out impacts and mitigation requirements. If we submit PDF, JPA via email and DoD Safe link, we'll send out. So yes, if any submittals that we are getting to our RegRod email, those, if they're new requests, will get entered into ORM. If they're revisions, they will get just sent to the USACE project manager. But all of those, everything that comes into our RegRod, we are also sending to the state agencies and the local wetlands board. We want to make absolutely sure that we're not mistakenly withholding anything that they would need. So yes, anything that comes in through RS, anything that comes in through the RegRod is being shared with the DEQ, VMRC, and local wetlands boards. Now, if you do submit through email, I will say it's going to take us a little bit longer to enter the project manually into the database and do all that. So, it may be several days before we can share those documents with the agencies, and then they've got time on their side to, VMRC uploads it to the website and all that. So there is going to be more of a delay if you're using the RegRod versus if you're using RS. Should this be used for modifications of existing permits? So general permits cannot be modified. So if you're asking for a quote modification of a general permit, yes, you can use RS because it's essentially a new verification. If you are looking to modify an individual permit, that's a good question. I think probably this system is going to ask you for more information than we actually need. So if you go into I didn't show you guys that, but there is a separate one for IPs. So that would be, if this is a new request for an IP, it would be this Department of Army Permit Engineering Form 4345. And it does require, all the basic information for a new permit. I think if it's a modification, potentially we don't need some of this, like the APOs. We really don't need to re-enter some of the aquatic resources and impacts. So I would say if you're requesting a modification of an IP at this point, send that request through the RegRod email. That'll be less work on your end, and I think will still be, easy for the PM to pick up and move forward with. Do we use this system to submit additional information requested by the agencies? So there is no ability to enter additional documents at this time in RRS. That is one of the improvements that they're working on. Until then, if you have revisions, additional information, anything like those, just send those to our RegRod email. And we will make sure they get to the USACE project manager, as well as being sent to the state agencies and the local wetlands boards. BMRC permits can be modified, use this, or work through BMRC directly. If you do not, that's a good question too. Is Brenda on the call? Are you out there, Brenda? Okay, maybe not. I think DEQ can process that separately if that is the only thing you need. So if you already have whatever you need or don't need anything from USACE or BMRC, I suspect you can send that directly to DEQ in that case. But Rowan, that might be a good one to write down, and we can provide a more complete answer as a frequently asked question. So anyone like from DEQ agreement, what would be the process for requesting any info for their processes that isn't captured here? So I think that would probably be, and I don't know if there is anybody from those agencies on, but similar to USACE, we may need additional information as well. And so once it's assigned to your project manager, that project manager would reach out to you for additional information. I suspect that will function the same way with DEQ and BMRC. Any other questions? Of course, Tracy. I owe you a response on something else too, sorry. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So I'll just reiterate again that if you have follow-up questions, if they're technical in nature, you can submit an RS help ticket. But if they're more about process for the core side, or just information needs within RS, then please do make use of this new contacts page, so that you can reach out directly to that regulator of the day, and they can help you with your questions. Okay, well, with that, I will let you all go. Thank you for attending. Thanks for some great questions. Like I said, we're going to take this chat and add some of these questions to our FAQs. And hopefully at some point next week, we'll have some additional information on the webpage. Okay, thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.